For 3 millennia, the galaxy thrived under the Galactic Peace Accord, a treaty that bound over 100 star systems in an unprecedented era of unity. The Accord wasn't just a document, it was a promise, a shield against the chaos of war. Its architects, a coalition of species weary of endless bloodshed, saw it as a fragile but necessary truce. Among them, humanity, the youngest and most underestimated race, played a reluctant yet vital role. Their ingenuity and ability to mediate complex disputes turned the tide in favor of peace. At the center of humanity's involvement was a diplomat whose name had become synonymous with compromise and hope. They were not merely a skilled negotiator, they were a figure shaped by history and burdened with legacy. Descended from one of the original signatories of the Accord, they had spent their life safeguarding the ideals their ancestors had fought for. To them, the treaty was more than policy, it was a sacred bond, something worth every sacrifice. The Galactic Empire, however, stood as the treaty's most imposing signatory. For centuries, it had loomed over the galaxy, its fleets and armies a constant reminder of its might. Outwardly, the Empire adhered to the Accord's terms, maintaining the delicate balance that ensured peace. But beneath the surface, its ambition simmered. The Empire tolerated the treaty not out of principle but as a convenient means to consolidate power. Its vast bureaucratic machine, fueled by conquest and subjugation, began to show cracks, though few dared to speak of them aloud. For years, humanity had worked to uphold the peace, even as whispers of unrest began to ripple through the galaxy. Distant colonies reported strange disappearances. Trade routes that had flourished for centuries were suddenly plagued by unexplained disruptions. And the Empire's envoys, once cordial and cooperative, became dismissive, their words laced with thinly veiled threats. The Diplomat observed these shifts with growing unease. They attended meetings where imperial representatives, once the champions of stability, began to speak with an arrogance that bordered on menace. Minor disputes that should have been resolved through dialogue escalated into simmering conflicts. In the shadows of Senate chambers, the whispers grew louder, the Empire was no longer content with peace. Yet, humanity remained cautious. Trust in the treaty held firm, though it wavered under the weight of these troubling signs. Humanity's diplomats worked tirelessly to soothe tensions, offering concessions and urging dialogue. The Diplomat, in particular, pushed for patience. Their belief in the Accord, though tested, remained unshaken. After all, 3,000 years of peace could not simply vanish overnight, or so they thought. In private moments, however, doubt gnawed at the edges of their resolve. Reports from frontier colonies painted a grim picture: settlements abandoned, their inhabitants vanished without a trace. The Diplomat read these accounts late into the night, their mind racing with questions. Was the Empire behind these events? Were they merely the work of rogue factions? Or was something far more sinister at play? The answers remained elusive, cloaked in layers of deception. Still, the Diplomat held fast to their duty. For decades, they had navigated the labyrinthine politics of the galaxy, forging alliances and resolving disputes. They believed in the power of dialogue, in the ability of words to bridge even the deepest divides. But as the signs of trouble multiplied, they could not ignore the growing sense of foreboding. Something was coming, something that threatened to shatter everything they had worked to preserve. The final warning came not in words but in silence. A human colony, nestled on the fringes of the galaxy, ceased all communication. Attempts to reach them were met with static, their transmissions abruptly cut off. The Diplomat, alarmed, called for an immediate investigation. But before any ships could be dispatched, the Empire issued a chilling statement: the colony had been neutralized as a matter of security. No further explanation was given. The Diplomat stood frozen as the message played, its cold, clinical tone a stark contrast to the horror it conveyed. Neutralized? The word echoed in their mind, a cruel euphemism for slaughter. This was no misunderstanding, no isolated incident. It was a declaration, an act that shattered the veneer of peace and revealed the Empire's true intentions. For the first time in their career, the Diplomat felt the weight of despair. The treaty, the foundation of their life's work, had been broken. The Empire had cast aside 3,000 years of peace with a single, brutal act. And humanity, caught off guard, was left to grapple with the implications. But even in their darkest moment, the diplomats' resolve did not waver. They knew what lay ahead would demand every ounce of their strength, every skill they had honed over decades. The peace was broken, but the fight was far from over. Humanity would not bow to fear, and the Empire would soon learn that their betrayal had awakened something far more dangerous, the unyielding rage of a species that refused to be silenced. The colony of Serentis was a jewel among humanity's settlements, a thriving world of crystalline oceans and bustling cities. Its people lived in harmony, confident in the protections afforded by the Galactic Peace Accord. But that confidence turned to ash in a single, unprovoked instant. Without warning, the Empire's warships emerged from hyperspace, their sleek, obsidian hulls blotting out the skies above Serentis. What followed was not war, it was annihilation. Energy beams rained down from orbit, slicing through the atmosphere with terrifying precision. Towers of glass and steel crumbled like sandcastles under the onslaught. Streets filled with panicked civilians became rivers of fire as the bombardment spread, leaving no refuge untouched. Families huddled in shelters, their cries drowned out by the deafening roar of destruction. Those who tried to flee found their ships targeted and obliterated before they could break the atmosphere. It was a massacre, executed with clinical efficiency. The Planetary Defense Force scrambled to respond, their fighters soaring into the chaos, but they were no match for the Empire's fleet. Ships were swatted from the sky like insects, their pilots barely registering the threat before they were reduced to debris. The defense systems, built under the assumption that peace would hold, faltered and fell. Within hours, Serentis was a smoldering wasteland, its once vibrant cities reduced to ruins. The Empire's fleet lingered just long enough to ensure there were no survivors, then vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind only silence. Far from the devastation, the human diplomat was engaged in a negotiation session with Imperial envoys. They were discussing a minor trade dispute, the kind of mundane issue the treaty had made almost routine. When the news of Serentis reached them, it came in the form of a stark, emotionless communiqué. The colony had been pacified, the Empire claimed, for harboring insurgents, a claim as baseless as it was cruel. The message provided no evidence, no justification beyond the Empire's own decree. The diplomat froze as the words sank in. Pacified. The term was grotesque in its detachment, a thin veneer over an act of pure barbarity. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt, the weight of the atrocity pressing down on them. They stared at the Imperial envoys, searching for some sign of regret, some acknowledgement of the horror that had unfolded. Instead, they were met with indifference. The Empire's lead representative, a figure draped in the ornate robes of authority, dismissed the event with a wave of their hand. It was a necessary action, they said, their voice cold and unyielding. A reminder of the cost of disobedience. Peace, after all, must be maintained through strength. The diplomats' hands clenched under the table, their nails digging into their palms. Every instinct screamed at them to lash out, to condemn the Empire for its barbarity, but they held their composure. They could not afford to show weakness, not here, not now. Their voice, when they spoke, was calm but laced with steel. 3,000 years of peace, they said, each word measured. 3,000 years of trust, shattered in an instant. Do you truly believe your actions will go unanswered? The Imperial envoy smirked, a gesture of calculated arrogance. The accord served its purpose. But the galaxy has changed. Humanity's place in it must also change. The diplomat said nothing further. There was nothing left to say. The meeting ended shortly after, the Empire's representatives departing with the air of conquerors who believed their victory complete. The diplomat remained seated long after they were gone, their mind a storm of emotions. Grief for the lives lost. Guilt for not foreseeing the betrayal. And beneath it all, a seething, unrelenting rage. Returning to their quarters, the diplomat reviewed the reports from Serentis. Every line was a dagger to the heart. Civilian casualties numbered in the millions. Entire families wiped out, their names erased from existence. Images of the devastation flickered on their screen: burning cities, scorched earth, the hollowed-out husks of once thriving habitats. It was more than an attack, it was a message. The Empire was declaring its supremacy, daring humanity to challenge it. In the quiet of their chamber, the Diplomat allowed their composure to crack. They pressed their hands to their face, their breaths coming in shallow, ragged bursts. For decades, they had fought to maintain the peace, sacrificing time, energy, and personal happiness to uphold the ideals of the Accord. And now, in the span of a single day, it was all undone. The weight of failure settled heavily on their shoulders, but even as despair threatened to consume them, a spark of resolve ignited within. This was not the end. It could not be the end. Humanity would grieve, yes. It would mourn the loss of Serentis, of its people, of its innocence. But humanity was not weak. It was not fragile. The Empire's betrayal had cut deep, but it had also awakened something that could not be extinguished. The Diplomats swore to themselves, to the memory of those lost, that this act of cruelty would not go unanswered. They knew the path ahead would be fraught with peril. Humanity stood at a crossroads, torn between clinging to the remnants of diplomacy or embracing the fires of retaliation. The Diplomat, for all their experience, could not yet see the way forward. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty: the Empire had made a grave miscalculation. They had mistaken humanity's patience for weakness, its restraint for submission. And now, they would face the consequences. The Diplomat rose, their grief tempered by a newfound determination. The galaxy would hear of Serentis, of the atrocity committed in the name of dominance. The Empire believed it had silenced a colony, but all it had done was awaken a storm. The Galactic Senate buzzed with restless energy, its chamber filled with delegates from every corner of the galaxy. At the heart of it stood the human Diplomat, their figure a stark contrast to the grandeur of the hall. They waited for the noise to die down, for the murmurs and side conversations to quiet. When they finally spoke, their voice cut through the room like a blade. "The Empire has shattered the peace," they began, their tone steady but fierce. 3,000 years of cooperation, trust, and progress, destroyed in a single act of barbarity. They did not simply kill the people of Serentis, they sent a message to all of us. A message of dominance. A message of fear. The room fell silent, the weight of their words settling over the gathered delegates. The Diplomat's eyes swept the chamber, meeting the gazes of those who had doubted humanity's resolve. "But let me send a message in return," they continued, their voice rising. "You broke the peace, but you've awakened a force that does not forgive. Humanity will not kneel. We will not cower. We will not be erased." The speech rippled through the chamber like a shockwave, leaving even the Empire's representatives momentarily stunned. The Diplomat did not stop. Their words grew sharper, striking at the very foundation of the Empire's authority. "For centuries, we endured your arrogance, your subtle threats, your veiled ambitions. We clung to the treaty because we believed in something greater than ourselves. But today, you have shown us your true face. And now, we will show you ours." When the Diplomat finished, the chamber erupted. Delegates whispered among themselves, some rallying behind humanity, others retreating into silence. The Empire's envoys, their confidence shaken, issued cold rebuttals, but their words felt hollow. The seed had been planted. Humanity's defiance was no longer a quiet ember, it was a roaring flame. Behind the scenes, humanity prepared. For decades, they had been underestimated, dismissed as idealists clinging to dreams of peace. But humanity's history was one of survival against impossible odds. On Earth, they had faced extinction more times than they could count, clawing their way back each time. That resilience had not vanished with their ascent to the stars, it had only grown stronger. Their technology, while appearing modest compared to the Empire's grand fleets, held secrets born from ingenuity and necessity. Their ships were not built for spectacle but for precision, each one a masterpiece of engineering designed for adaptability and efficiency. Beyond their technology, humanity's greatest asset lay in their minds, strategists who thought in ways no algorithm could predict, soldiers who thrived in chaos, and leaders who could turn desperation into victory. The Diplomat spearheaded alliances with factions long disillusioned by the Empire's rule. Small, scattered groups that had suffered under Imperial control now saw an opportunity in humanity's stand. Together, they pooled their resources, creating a coalition driven not by conquest but by a shared determination to break free from the Empire's grasp. Humanity's first strike came without warning, mirroring the brutality of the Empire's attack on Serentis. But where the Empire had sown destruction indiscriminately, humanity's blow was precise. A vital Imperial supply convoy, guarded by some of the most advanced warships in the fleet, became the target. The attack was swift and surgical. As the convoy moved through hyperspace lanes, humanity's forces struck from multiple vectors. Their ships emerged from concealed positions, weapons already locked. The convoy's escorts scrambled to respond, but humanity's tactics were unlike anything they had faced. Coordinated strikes disabled key systems, and advanced jamming technologies turned the Empire's ships into isolated, vulnerable targets. The battle was over in minutes. The convoy was destroyed, its supplies lost to the void. Not a single human ship was lost. The message was clear: humanity was no longer playing by the Empire's rules. They would not fight on terms dictated by their enemy. They would redefine the battlefield, exploiting every weakness the Empire had ignored in its arrogance. Word of the counterattack spread quickly, reaching even the farthest corners of the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the Empire was forced to acknowledge a challenge it could not easily dismiss. Delegates from neutral factions watched humanity's retaliation with growing interest, some quietly reaching out to offer their support. The balance of power was shifting. Within their command center, the Diplomat received reports of the mission's success. They allowed themselves a brief moment of satisfaction, though the weight of the conflict ahead remained heavy. The Empire would respond, and the battles to come would be even fiercer. But humanity had made its stand. The rage born from betrayal had been channeled into action, and there was no turning back. The galaxy now understood what the Empire had unleashed. Humanity, once the peacemakers, had become a force that could not be ignored. The war had begun, and humanity was ready. The Empire's response was swift and predictable. They mobilized their fleets, vast and imposing, filling the void of space with their war machines. They moved as they always had, with arrogance born of centuries of domination, assuming that humanity's defiance was a fleeting outburst. To the Empire, this was not a war, it was a mere insurrection to be crushed. But humanity had already proven they were no longer playing by the Empire's rules. In the Senate, the Empire sought to spin their aggression as a necessary action to preserve galactic order. Their representatives spoke with practiced confidence, framing humanity as reckless and destabilizing. Yet, their words rang hollow. Reports of Serentis and whispers of humanity's daring counterattack had already spread. The galaxy's smaller factions, long silent in the face of Imperial domination, began to voice their doubts. Dissent grew louder with each passing day, and for the first time in centuries, the Empire found itself on the defensive, not on the battlefield, but in the court of public opinion. Amid this chaos, the Diplomat worked tirelessly, their strategy unfolding with precision. They reached out to neutral factions, carefully planting seeds of alliance. Each conversation was measured, every word chosen to emphasize not just humanity's struggle, but the shared threat the Empire posed to all. The Diplomat painted a vivid picture: today, it was Serentis; tomorrow, it could be anyone. Slowly but surely, factions began to listen. When the Empire called for a high-level negotiation to restore order, the Diplomat seized the opportunity. They proposed a meeting aboard a neutral station, a place steeped in the history of the Accord. It was a symbolic gesture, one that lent the illusion of humanity's willingness to find a peaceful resolution. The Empire accepted, confident that they could use the occasion to reassert their dominance and portray humanity as unreasonable aggressors. The meeting was attended by high-ranking Imperial leaders, their presence a testament to their overconfidence. They arrived with an air of superiority, their words laced with condescension as they lectured on the importance of maintaining stability. The Diplomat, outwardly calm, allowed them to speak, watching as they unknowingly walked into the trap. As the imperial leaders presented their demands, the Diplomat unveiled their hidden agenda. With a single command, a series of holographic displays came to life, projecting irrefutable evidence of the Empire's atrocities. Images of Sorrentis, of charred landscapes and silenced cities, filled the chamber. Recorded transmissions from surviving witnesses played, their voices raw with pain and fear. Documents exposing the Empire's deliberate targeting of civilian populations surfaced, shattering any pretense of their moral high ground. The chamber erupted. Delegates from neutral factions, many of whom had remained quiet out of fear, voiced their outrage. The Empire's representatives, caught off guard, stumbled over their words, their defenses crumbling under the weight of the evidence. The Diplomat stood at the center of the storm, their voice cutting through the noise. "You speak of stability while you burn worlds," they said, their tone measured but seething with barely restrained fury. "You claim to protect order, yet you wield terror as your weapon. This is the truth of your empire, a house of lies built on the ashes of the innocent." The Empire's leaders attempted to regain control, but the Diplomat pressed on, their words relentless. They turned to the gathered delegates, their gaze sweeping the room. "This is not just humanity's fight," they declared. "This is a fight for every world that values freedom, for every being that refuses to live under the shadow of fear. The Empire has shown its true face. Now, it is time we show ours." At that moment, humanity's trap was sprung. From hyperspace, an allied fleet emerged, its presence a declaration of defiance. Ships from humanity and their newly forged alliances surrounded the neutral station, their weapons trained on key Imperial vessels. The Empire's warships, caught unprepared, scrambled to respond, but it was too late. In one swift maneuver, their fleet's command structure was disabled, rendering their forces vulnerable. The chamber descended into chaos as the Imperial leaders realized the extent of their miscalculation. The Diplomat stepped forward, their voice cutting through the cacophony. "This is your final warning," they said, their tone cold and unyielding. "Withdraw your forces. End your campaign of terror. If you do not, you will find that humanity's wrath is not something you can contain." The Empire's leaders, humiliated and cornered, had no choice but to concede, for now. The meeting ended with the Empire's delegation retreating in disgrace, their confidence shattered. The Allied fleet held its position as a silent reminder of the consequences of further aggression. As the Diplomat watched the Empire's ships depart, they allowed themselves a moment of satisfaction. The tide was turning. Humanity had not only stood its ground but had struck a blow that the Empire would not soon forget. The galaxy now saw humanity not as victims but as a force capable of defying even the most powerful. The Diplomat knew the war was far from over, but they also knew this: the Empire's days of unchecked dominance were numbered. The ripple of rebellion spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. Humanity's stand had become a beacon for oppressed worlds across the galaxy, and the Empire's once loyal planets began to rise. From the industrial heartlands of Obrix to the agricultural colonies on Rhinal, declarations of independence erupted like wildfires. Imperial governors were ousted, their banners torn down and replaced with symbols of liberation. What had started as humanity's fight for survival had transformed into a galactic revolution. The Empire, bloated by centuries of unchecked power, found itself unable to quell the uprisings. Their fleets were stretched thin, their resources depleted, and their political control unraveling. Planets that had long resented the Empire's iron grip now saw their chance to break free. The airwaves were filled with cries of defiance, leaders proclaiming their allegiance not to the Empire but to a new vision of justice and freedom. On Earth, the Diplomat watched the galaxy change, their presence a reminder of the spark that had ignited the fire. Their face bore the marks of exhaustion, their eyes heavy with the weight of the war they had helped lead. Yet there was pride, too, an unshakable pride in what humanity had achieved. They had been the first to stand against the Empire, the first to say, "No more." And their stand had inspired countless others to do the same. Messages flooded in from across the galaxy, words of gratitude from freed worlds, calls for guidance from newly independent leaders, and even tentative overtures from former Imperial officials seeking amnesty. The Diplomat answered each with the same steady resolve they had shown since the beginning. This was not just humanity's moment, it was the galaxy's. They reminded every faction that their fight was not about replacing one oppressor with another but about building something fundamentally better. The Diplomat's legacy grew with each passing day. They became more than a figure of diplomacy, they became a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit. Across the galaxy, their words were remembered, their speeches quoted in every language. On liberated worlds, statues were erected in their honor, not as a monument to an individual, but as a testament to what humanity had inspired. But the Diplomat themselves remained humble, retreating from the spotlight as the galaxy began to heal. They walked among their people, visiting the rebuilt colonies, speaking with the families who had lost loved ones, and offering solace where they could. They carried the weight of every life lost in the struggle, every decision that had led to destruction. Yet, they found comfort in knowing that their choices, however painful, had been necessary to break the Empire's chains. In the aftermath of the Empire's collapse, the galaxy faced a critical juncture. The vacuum left by the Empire's fall could have easily descended into chaos, with factions vying for power and control. But humanity, forged in the crucible of its own trials, stepped forward to lead, not as conquerors, but as architects of a new order. The Diplomat became instrumental in forming a coalition of free worlds, a union built not on fear but on mutual respect and equality. The lessons of the Galactic Peace Accord, both its successes and its failures, were woven into the foundation of this new alliance. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy gathered to draft a charter that ensured no single faction could dominate the others. Humanity's voice was strong in these discussions, advocating for transparency, justice, and the protection of all sentient life. As the coalition took shape, the galaxy began to transform. Trade routes reopened, fostering cooperation and prosperity. Scientific advancements, once hoarded by the Empire, were shared freely, leading to breakthroughs that improved life for all. Former imperial worlds, now free, began to rebuild, their people charting their own destinies for the first time in centuries. In the Diplomat's final address to the coalition, they stood before a gathering of thousands, their voice steady despite the emotion behind it. Today, we close a chapter defined by tyranny and fear. But more importantly, we begin a new story, one written by all of us, together. Let this coalition stand as a testament to what we can achieve when we choose unity over division, hope over despair. The galaxy is ours to shape. Let us shape it with care. Their words echoed through the hall, carried by the hearts of those who had witnessed humanity's courage. Applause erupted, not just for the Diplomat, but for the future they had helped make possible. As the years passed, the Diplomat faded from the public eye, their mission complete. They spent their remaining days in quiet reflection, content in the knowledge that they had played their part. Their legacy endured, not just in the statues or the history books, but in the hearts of the countless beings who now lived free because of their efforts. The galaxy had been forever changed by humanity's defiance. A new era of justice had dawned, one that carried the scars of the past but also the promise of a brighter future. And at the heart of it all was the memory of a Diplomat who had dared to believe in something greater, and had inspired a galaxy to believe as well.